Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, friends, I want to continue our discussion of the four foundations of mindfulness. And yesterday we left off with the finishing up the sections on feelings, contemplation of feelings, and the contemplation of mind states. And also we started talking about the five aggregates, because the five aggregates are the main focus of developing wisdom, and they are intimately connected with the four foundations of mindfulness. So, in the contemplation of the body, the contemplation of feelings, the contemplation of the mind, basically these three the sections are kind of laying the groundwork for the mindfulness, and also laying the groundwork for developing concentration and mindfulness. Again, to first get the mind grounded and centered in the body, because that's where the whole world arises, stays and ceases, is right within this body with its nervous system. And feelings are the transition point from the external world to the mind. The external world meets the mind at feeling. I mean, sound, vibration, smells, taste, visible vibrations, touches on the outer body. That's where the mind gets activated, and where thoughts are produced. So the last section is called, usually translated as, well, it's Dhammanupassana, but translated as the contemplation on mental objects. But actually I prefer to just use the term Dhamma, because it's the Dhamma that the Buddha taught. If you read through all the suttas, almost all the suttas, or 75% of them, talk about the body and the mind, and about cultivating concentration, mindfulness, and wisdom. And also in that, the five hindrances, the five aggregates, the sixfold sense bases, the 7 factors of enlightenment, and the Four Noble Truths. Again, these 5 topics are the focus of 3/4 or probably more of all the talks and suttas that the Buddha discussed. So basically it's the Dhamma. In fact, the Four Noble Truths itself, the whole Buddhist teaching is centered on the Four Noble Truths. And that's one of these contemplations of the Dhamma. But as we'll see, the contemplation of the Four Noble Truths, the understanding of the Four Noble Truths, is the very last one that is listed or mentioned in the Foundations of Mindfulness, or in the contemplation of the Dhamma. So, anyway, in order to contemplate the Dhamma, because these are the subtle Dhammas, the subtle mental activities, especially the last four. So there's 5 categories of Dhammanupassana. And the first one is the 5 hindrances. Because again, as long as the 5 hindrances are active and haven't been weakened or temporarily overcome, then it's not likely that one is going to have the kind of concentration and mindfulness needed to properly penetrate other body-mind phenomena. So, 5 hindrances. Hindrances. Again, the 5 hindrances are sensual desire, and that means the mind is attracted by the desire for sights, sounds, smells, touches, body feelings, and even thoughts. And if it doesn't have them, then it starts creating fantasies or desires about how it can get some objective sensual desire. So that, takes us away from our meditation and just creates more defilements in the mind. So, and how does one abide contemplating desire? When desire arises in him, the person understands there is sensual desire in me. Sensual desire has arisen. Or if there's no sensual desire, one understands there is no sensual desire. And he also understands how the arising of sensual desire comes to be. And he understands how the sensual desire comes to be abandoned. And he understands how there comes to be the non-arising of sensual desire in the future. So those 3 things are what are the aspect of cultivating the wisdom. How does this sensual desire arise? How does it cease? How does one let go of it? How does it cease? And how is it kept from arising in the future? And then the same analysis is given to the rest of the hindrances. The second one being, ill will has arisen in me. Or ill will has arisen. Or he recognizes there is ill will in the mind, where he recognizes there's no ill will in him. And he understands, how does this ill will arise? How does it cease? And how does it cease coming again in the future? In the same way for restlessness and worry. One understands how the mind is beset with restlessness, worrying about this or that. Restless, thinking about the future, just not being able to kind of sit still. How does this restlessness and worry arise? And how does it cease? And how is it kept from arising again in the future? And then the same with sloth and torpor. Sloth and torpor has arisen. Or there is no sloth and torpor. And how does the sloth and torpor arise? How does it cease? How is it kept from coming again in the future? And then the fifth one is doubt. You start doubting, I don't know, I don't think I'll ever be able to meditate. I don't know. Who is the Buddha anyway? Maybe he's just a fictitious character. I don't know. Or, what's meditation going to prove anyway? So these doubts, it prevents a person from giving 100% to the practice. So when the pain gets too much, I say, well, I think it's better to go lay down and take rest or something. Or keep changing the posture rather than wanting to sit through the pain. So that is how one contemplates mental objects as the five hindrances. And so that section about understanding how does this arise, and how does it cease, and how is it kept from arising in the future? These are the aspects of wisdom that are developed. Anybody have an idea, how does it arise? How does sensual desire arise? Yes, contact and feeling, but then even more important, wrong attention. That means wrong attention, wrong intention. Ayoniso manasikara. That means you attend to it. Let's say if the desire for some pleasurable object arises, then you start saying, yes, that is really a beautiful object. I'm looking at that person, and you start thinking all of it is. And you start seeing the marks of beauty and thinking how wrong attention. Yeah. Instead of wise attention. So one has to exert wise attention. And that means you examine, okay, this sensual desire is there. It arises because I've practiced it in the past, because I only focus on the marks of the beauty and I don't see the decaying aspect of those objects. And I've lost that connection to the present moment. And I can't derive pleasure or happiness from just the present moment, feeling the blood pulsing in my arteries. So I have to get my kicks in some external object, or I have to amuse myself in the external object. So that's how it arises from several different factors. We've allowed the object to stick in our mind, and our mind get attracted to it. Of course, we've been practicing it our whole life, so it's a very strong habit. But it's because we keep on, and especially in this environment, this kind of society that is always, all the time, just, trying to make things more beautiful and more attractive, and saying you can't live without these things. And so our mind is always, has been brainwashed into thinking that we have to have more and more attractive and beautiful sights, sounds, smells, taste and touch. They're always coming out with stronger, more fragrant perfumes, right? Every month or two, or other types of things. So, it's the average person that has to withstand all of these pressures. Most people can't unless they, have the right understanding. Anyway, so we contemplate those hindrances, and also to know the antidotes, how to apply the appropriate antidotes to the hindrances, until gradually we're able to, weaken them. So, that is contemplating the mental objects, in the mental objects, or contemplating Dhamma and Dhamma. That means contemplating a specific topic of Dhamma within the larger body of the Dhamma teachings. And that way, the hindrances, if they haven't already subsided, like perhaps when you were doing the first 3 foundations of mindfulness, maybe you weaken the hindrances 50%, or maybe a little bit more. But that was enough to enable the mind to get 50% connected to the present moment, as I was mentioning before, right? To have that 50% concentration. And then the other 50%, the reserve alertness that can be aware of the other things happening. And then by the time we get to Dhammanupassana, then there's still those residual hindrances are there, so you apply this attention, now that you have the concentration to kind of support it, now you're able to concentrate, focus on the hindrances when they arise and apply this contemplation, as I just mentioned, understanding how is it arising, how does it cease, how does it stop from coming in the future, until they even subside or stop more. And now the ground is set for like excuse my expression if I say, like in a bullfight, right? The matador, he weakens the bull by all of his things, and at the end he I won't say it because that's politically non-correct, so, but anyway, he shoves it in for the last kill. And so these last 4 categories of contemplation of the Dhamma, the 5 aggregates, the 6 senses, the 7 factors of enlightenment, and the 4 noble truths. So so one understands where we're talking about the 5 aggregates, so I'll try to finish talking about them. So the aggregate of the body, or material forms, it's not only the body, but material forms. And why is it called an aggregate, actually? Why is the term khanda, is the Pali word, but why is it called an aggregate or a collection? Because it's all the memories of every material stimulus that we learned from the baby or even brought over from previous lives. And all the feelings also that have been accumulated and remembered in the mind since we were a young child or from previous lives. And the perceptions and the habits and even the consciousness. So they're called heaps. But anyway, so when material form arises, the person understands, this is material form. That means a sound. If you hear a sound, that's material form. That means that's a material vibration. In either of those 4 modes, solid, fluid, heat, motion, or earth, water, fire, and air. And he understands, how does this material form arise? How does it cease? And how does it cease coming in the future? And then when a feeling arises, one understands, painful feeling has arisen. Now, how does this painful feeling arise? How does it cease? How does it keep from coming in again in the future? Or a pleasant feeling has arisen in me now. And then the perception, the third aggregate is the perception, or the mental pictures that pop out with each material stimulus, or with each material vibration and feeling. So the feeling arises immediately with the vibration. You can't really separate them much. But the feeling, we can't change the vibration, we can change our reaction to feeling. Like you can't change a sound coming into your ear, but you can change your reaction to the sound. Like instead of having aversion to a sound, you could actually cultivate and start to enjoy a particular sound. And vice versa. And in that way, this morning, just before lunch, there were some loud sounds, coming from over here. Did anybody have any perceptions arise in their mind? Anybody have any negative, painful feeling? Or aversion? And so we can't control that, right? The world is the world. And these things arise because of a cause and a condition. You're not asking it to come. It comes uninvited. And then you think, it's going to last all day long, and all of a sudden after 10 minutes it ceases, vanishes. So you can't even control it vanishing. You can't control it arising, and you can't control it vanishing. Because it arises from its own conditions. So, anyway. So form, then feeling, perception, and then the volitional activities. These are the reactions to the perception. See, with feeling and perception, you may not have reacted yet, but it's because of the combination of the feeling and the perception. Then if it's a pleasurable feeling and a pleasurable perception, then we might react with some kind of greed or desire. That means some thoughts associated with how am I going to get this object. That's the mental formation. That's the volitional formation, or the desire. And they're triggered off just like a domino effect. Or all four of them. First the sound vibration, then the feeling, the perception, and the volition. And sometimes all that happens in just a fraction of a second. And the volitional formation is where you create the karma. That means, let's say if all of a sudden you had a strong stinging sensation or itch on your head. So you feel it as a painful feeling, you perceive it as being some kind of an itch, or if it's a fly, you're imagining a fly crawling on you and going into your eye right there and thinking, dirty fly, and then the desire to get rid of it. And then that causes the arm to come up and try to shoo it away. Or in some cases, maybe even try to kill it. So all of that is the volitional formation. That's a very big category because it includes thoughts and it includes the intentions for action and the actual impulses that finish that action, like causing the arm to lift up and then to remove the object. Or it will cause you to speak and shout at somebody if somebody said something immediately. So all that is the volitional formation, what's called sankhara. That's the sankhara. And then the consciousness. The consciousness basically is the ego consciousness. It's the idea that I am doing this, or this is happening to me, and I am doing this. I am deciding to do this. And so all those five together, basically they triggered off and they come together like, they all come together kind of at once to form what we call a mind moment, or a moment of full cognition. But when the stimulus that caused them vanishes, then those other aggregates, they cease. But they may rise up again in the next moment. So all five of those five aggregates come together kind of at one time and cease. But that happens over and over and over again. That's happening, according to Abhidhamma, 10 to the 29th power times in the blink of an eye. That means many, many, many thousands of times and perhaps millions of times. In the blink of an eye, that five aggregate process arises and vanishes. And that's what's called the real impermanence. To tune into that and see, you're not going to see it maybe happening that fast, but you can tune in to see how that process is going on, like, quite a few times, even in a, 1 or 2 seconds, you can notice, even up to 10, 15, or 20 or more, things just like that. Maybe not that exactly clearly, but you get enough a good idea that it's happening that way to be convinced about it. Anyway, so that's contemplating, the five aggregates in terms of the impermanence. Because the five aggregates are everything we identify with. And so whenever one of those will predominate in an experience. So especially if you feel a pain, okay, but you can easily see with a pain, that's material vibration, and that's painful feeling. And then when you call it my knee, that's the perception. And then when there's an urge to move your knee to relieve the pain, that's the volitional formations. And then you can see the I don't like it is the consciousness. So you can see the five aggregates. If you analyze them that way, in many experiences, you can easily see how all those five are playing their own little function. And to be able to watch that, as it's happening from body sensations, even sounds, even thoughts, if you're well concentrated, you can kind of see how that process is working. And you see how it happens by itself. And even the sense of the I is just created within the mind, as we've already talked about. That's why I make a distinction between consciousness and awareness. And consciousness has that subject-object division, with the sense of I am experiencing this object separate from myself. Whereas in awareness, the I, feeling of I, is not functioning so much. And the awareness is more sort of expanded, and the ego is not so strong and aggressive. We call that a more expanded awareness, where there's not so much reaction, it's more awareness opposed to the consciousness that's identifying and reacting to various things coming and going. So anyway, so one understands these 5 aggregates, understands how they arise, how they continue, and how they cease. Or cease coming again in the future. Now, how many understand how will they cease coming in the future? Only by attaining enlightenment and terminating the rounds of rebirth. Then only the 5 aggregates get dispersed, not to come together again. But that's another story or another topic. So the 5 aggregates, so one contemplates that. And so even in one meditation, or let's say once you spend the first 15 or 20 minutes centering the mind and the body, developing some tranquility with the breathing, being able to notice and observe different sensations, and weaken the hindrances to a certain extent, then, just take these 5 aggregates as your topic of contemplation and try to identify them. If you hear a sound, that's sound vibration. And then you can recognize the feeling in that. Is there attraction to the sound, or is there aversion, or is it just indifference? Neither pain nor pleasure. Many of them may be neither. And there's identification of being some object. You call it a car going down the road, a chainsaw, a teacher's voice, somebody drinking water. Those are very easy to see, actually. So really, I recommend people training to understand perception, because that's feeling and perception are what stand out quite clearly, especially the names and labels we give to everything. As we look around, we're identifying, picture, window, person, man, woman, this. It's happening automatically in the mind. But those are perceptions. So, after one contemplates the 5 aggregates, or even at the same time, the next category of Dhammanupassana is the 6-fold sense sphere. Now that's similar to the 5 aggregates, but it's different also. So it means the meditator understands this is the I, this is visible object, and this is the attraction of the object, or this is the fetter that arises dependent on contact with the I. So when you hear a sound, you can see either like attraction or aversion, desire or aversion. That is the fetter that arises based on visible object contacting the I, or the sound with the ear. And he understands the skin and touch. He understands the nose and odors. We have the nose, but there has to be an odor coming to produce smelling. And then in that smelling, it will be something pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And especially if it's something pleasant with attachment. Oh, we're having pizza for lunch. Oh, I hope they put pepperoni on it. I hope, kind of thinking like that. So you can easily see the fetter that arises upon the contact of the senses. Or if it's something you see out in the garden and you see a snake in the grass, then the fetter that arises because of an object striking the eye, maybe fear. And of course, on the body itself. Or even with your own thoughts. There's a pleasurable thought in the mind, and it entices you to want to fantasize about it or get carried away in a sensual fantasy. or it's some aversion. And so you see the fetter that arises even within the mind object, which is like anger, and then the consciousness that's cognizing it. So like that, you just listen to the senses and how these also are just arising and vanishing. When the sound that produced the hearing ceases, the hearings of that sound ceases, but the mind still might continue to hold on to it and think about it. So you hear things twice. You hear it physically and then you hear it mentally. Or you feel it physically with something on your arm, but then the mind starts feeling it in terms of its thinking about it and worrying about what that pain is going to bring, or so on. So this is part of also the contemplation, understanding how these things arise, how they grab our mind, and how we can sort of dislodge them. So even within the six senses, the five aggregates are all working, because when a sound touches the ear and you see the fetter, all five of those aggregates are working, because the sound itself is the material aggregate, and then the feeling, and the perception, and the volition, and the ego consciousness, are all of that. So as you are observing that, and of course the five aggregates and the six senses can be done even simultaneously at the same time, because they're so intimately kind of interwoven. But it's good the Buddha gave them as separate contemplations, because it gives you a different outlook on the same thing. It's like examining something from one side and then examining it from another side. And so you get a fuller understanding or appreciation of that particular object when you examine it from a couple of different angles, as opposed to just only one angle. And so it covers all your bases. If anything happens, there's a way you can contemplate it. Either as one of the aggregates, or as one of the six senses. But importantly, seeing how it's all happening by itself. Where is the self or the me that's controlling that? It all happens by itself. The objects come in, strike the organs by themselves. You're not inviting them. And they also disappear without you're wanting them. Even if you want it to stay, it may disappear. And if you want it to disappear, it may not disappear. Because there's no self that can control it. So that is also part of the right understanding, that we also, the insight. That's a kind of an insight that may come in your meditation somewhere. You might say, that's it. Buddha was a genius. No, that's really a type of, I had many of those. Anyway, so now, the next section of the Dhammanupassana, and the five aggregates in the six senses, they take up two whole books within the Pali Canon, Samyutta Nikaya. The Salayatana Vagga and the Kanda Vagga are complete books of hundreds of suttas about just the five aggregates, and a different book about just the sixfold senses, as well as there's many chapters just on the 7 factors of enlightenment, and so on. But anyway, so the fourth contemplation, now again, these normally should be done in that order because of the ease and the natural connection between one and the other. Now the 7 factors of enlightenment.
And here the Buddha says, and how does a person contemplate the mind objects as the 7 factors of enlightenment? Here, when one understands the enlightenment factor of mindfulness is present, or one understands the enlightenment factor of mindfulness is not present, and one understands how does the enlightenment factor of mindfulness arise, and why doesn't it arise? And the same with the other ones. So if you're sitting in a good state where you're able to detect, subtle sensations and sounds and kind of really be on top of them before they've carried you away, then you could say, that's really the mindfulness factor. Maybe not of enlightenment, but it will lead to enlightenment when it's fully developed. It's only when you see the crystal clear arising and vanishing of things moment to moment, that is said to be the quality of the enlightenment factor of mindfulness. And that requires, the strong concentration. And then the second enlightenment factor is investigation of Dhamma. Investigation of that Dhamma that you're mindful of. In other words, if a certain fetter arises, or the sound arises, you investigate again. How does this sound arise? Because the material stimulus contacted the ear and hearing arose. That's how it arises. And how does the fetter arise on it? It's because of unwise attention to the sound, allowing your mind to get attached to that sound with either desire and aversion. So that investigation is, again, about how do things arise, how do they cease, how do they keep from arising again in the future. That's the topic of the investigation. Or how does the suffering arise? How does the suffering continue? How does the suffering cease? And how does it cease coming again in the future too? So anyway, there's mindfulness is the first enlightenment factor. That's that attentive mind that can note from moment to moment the various objects that are trying to pull your mind away. The mindfulness is there before it gets dragged away. And then one investigates that until the mind can let go of it. If the mind gets caught by that particular object, sound, sight, smell, taste, touch, or thought, like that octopus starts getting 1 or 2 tentacles on you, you investigate it. Why is this thing sticking in the mind? How does the mind let go of this? And then apply the appropriate antidote so the mind lets go of it before getting dragged away. So that investigation is one of the most important parts of actually vipassana meditation. And the cultivation of the Chintamaya Panna. So, and then the investigation of Dhamma, so it's like the scientist, the scientist. If he sees something happening under the microscope, he's got to investigate it. Oh, this white blood cell is rushing over to gobble up this bacteria. What's the meaning of that? Investigate it. What happens? What caused it? Where does it go from there? That's the mind of the scientist. That's the investigative mind. And then we apply that to what is happening with our own body and mind. And then the third enlightenment factor is energy. That means because of that, the mind gets a lot of energy because it's so interesting. And just like the scientist, if he gets close to discovering the cure for the disease he was working on, he could stay up day and night, not tired, because you want to get to the end of the experiment. Right? Maybe in your own life, you were doing something, you really got your interest, and you stayed up all night wanting to continue that. All the sleepiness was banished from the mind. So that's called the enlightenment factor of energy. It comes from the investigation. But first you have to be mindful. So the mindfulness isolates the object, then that concentrated awareness that you've already cultivated from before investigates it, goes around it from different angles. 5 aggregates, 6 senses, impermanence, no self. And while doing that, you become very joyful, you become very happy. Because by this time, all the hindrances were totally subsided. And therefore, you stimulate dopamine in the brain. I mean, that's my own commentary. In concentration, in my view, I think concentration stimulates. So there's a glands that produce dopamine. And that's why that's piti, when people feel the happiness and rapture in meditation, is because of that kind of concentration. And modern scientists would say that's dopamine is causing the happiness. So that joy, that's the enlightenment factor of joy. And then there's the tranquility. Because of that joy, the mind becomes even more tranquil than it was before. The body and the mind. And that's almost equal to like the third jhanic joy. And the joy and the tranquility is like the piti and the sukha in the second and third jhanas you reach during this practice of meditation, of vipassana meditation. That's why you reach jhana through vipassana meditation and not doing it separately. Although you could do it separately, but it's reached during vipassana meditation too. And then, so that's the enlightenment factor of passaddhi, mental and physical tranquility, which is basically samadhi. And then the very next enlightenment factor is concentration, and that means jhana. It could mean the fourth jhana even. Either 1 through the 4 jhanas of enlightenment. The concentration factor of enlightenment factor of concentration is equal to that jhanic level. And the last factor of the 7 factors of enlightenment, the last one is equanimity, or Gleitmut in German, right? So equanimity. And equanimity is the hallmark of the 3rd and 4th jhana. And so this is where concentration and vipassana, they're producing the same results. People practice concentration to try to get in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th jhana. You can practice vipassana and get into the 2nd, 3rd, 4th jhana. And then, if you maintain that equanimity, means it's no longer being affected by any type of stimulus. It's totally, just resting in the present moment. But imbued with wisdom. It's not an indifference. It's wisdom that sees the emptiness, the impermanence and the emptiness basically because it's already understood it by doing all the previous work, reaching up to that point. It's right there on the threshold. of that total detachment. And if you maintain that long enough, then the eye of Dhamma can open. But with these 7 factors of enlightenment poised, then the last of the Dhamma contemplations, what did I say? The granddaddy of them all, the Four Noble Truths. So when one has developed those 7 factors of enlightenment through that whole process, and it come to that point, then one understands with lightning clarity, this is suffering, this is the cause of suffering, this is the cessation of suffering, and this is the path leading to the cessation of suffering. It crystallizes, all 4 of those crystallize basically in one kind of moment. But again, it might just be like the camera lens opening and shutting really quick. But nevertheless, it's such a powerful experience because it's called penetration. It penetrates through the last veils of ego ignorance. And one, the mind enters the stream. And how many remember that verse I recited from the song of Vipassana song? You don't remember?
Some of it.
What part? And so, then it says, now is the time, conditions are prime, the enlightenment factors are developed well, the Four Noble Truths become clear as a bell. The eye of Dhamma is opened wide, the 3 lower fetters are broken in stride. Tonight the yogi enters the stream, tomorrow Nibbana no longer a dream. That's it. I mean, that's, that's it in a nutshell. If one can do that. But anyway, so, the Four Noble Truths, and that's why only the Sotapanna has understood the Four Noble Truths. That's why why only a Sotapanna is standing on the Eightfold Path, right understanding, because that's considered to be the right understanding, is the moment of stream entry, where you clearly understand the Four Noble Truths. So everybody else is trying to practice the Noble Eightfold Path. Only when you reach that level of stream entry are you said to be standing on the path. So a lot of people, get up close to it, but then decide, they turn around because of doubts. It prevents them from letting go. Because like the mind, when you come to that point of equanimity in the 7 factors of enlightenment, the mind is no longer reaching out or attracted to any sense stimulus. It's like a person learning to swim in a swimming pool, and they're holding on to the edge of the pool with one hand, right? They don't want to let go. And then they let go with one finger, and then let go with another finger. And the one little finger still kind of holding to the side, like the security blanket in that cartoon Peanuts, right? The guy always has a security blanket with him. And so the mind doesn't want to let go of that last toehold to myself. But when the factors are ripe, even then that last little toehold gets momentarily severed, and then the mind fully opens. So anyway, that is how the four foundations of mindfulness are cultivated. And again, the Buddha gave them in that order because each one is a stepping stone to the next in terms of developing more concentration, more mindfulness, deeper understanding. And that last, that moment of entering the stream is what you would call bhavanamaya panya, would be the insight, the wisdom that comes through meditation, means realizing those four stages of, enlightenment. Up until that time, you're cultivating Chintamaya Panya. Now, I wanted to also make the comparison with the Anapanasati Sutta, as I mentioned on the first day when I started this series of talks, that the Anapanasati Sutta also is similar to the Satipatthana Sutta. And we saw that throughout the mindfulness of the breathing section, the instructions on mindfulness of breathing were the same given in Anapanasati Sutta and the same as given in the Satipatthana Sutta. But then, after they finished the section on breathing, then the section on postures, the section on 32 body parts, the section on the four elements, the cemetery contemplations, these are kind of not included in the Anapanasati Sutta, because the Anapanasati Sutta is focusing mostly on the breathing. That's why it's called Anapanasati, mindfulness of breathing. And that's why the four foundations is called Four Foundations of Mindfulness, because there's four different sections to it. But within the Anapanasati Sutta, there are 16 stages. I'm not going to go through all of them because it's too many things. It can be confusing. But the sections on feeling and the mind are also covered in the Anapanasati Sutta. And so in the Anapanasati Sutta, after developing that mindfulness of breathing, then it says the meditator breathes in, experiencing rapture. They breathe out, experiencing rapture. They breathe in, experiencing mental pleasure. They breathe out, experiencing mental pleasure. So basically, these are these feelings, pleasurable feelings, especially the pleasurable feelings. So you're contemplating those as you are breathing in and out. So you maintain the breathing throughout, the contemplation of the mind too. And then even in the contemplation of the mind, in the Anapanasati Sutta, he trains himself breathing in, contemplating the mind, breathing out, contemplating the mind, gladdening the mind, concentrating the mind, liberating the mind. He breathes in, liberating the mind, breathing out. And then even with insight, you're breathing in, contemplating impermanence, breathing out, contemplating impermanence. He trains thus, so he's training the mind to contemplate impermanence. He trains thus, I shall breathe in, contemplating fading away. I shall breathe out, contemplating fading away. And what does fading away mean? It means the mind letting go of the various sensory objects that it might have previously been attracted to. So the fading away of that following the various sensory stimulus. He trains thus, contemplating cessation, breathing in, contemplating sensation, breathing out, contemplating relinquishment, breathing in, contemplating relinquishment, breathing out. And that means you're seeing how great it is when the mind starts letting go of its attraction to objects. You're experiencing that insight and that joy about, letting go of these objects, fading out of the mind. It means the fading out of greed, hatred, and delusion. Fading out of the nervousness and fear and anxiety about the various things coming to you or your own thoughts. And so contemplating cessation, breathing in, cessation, basically that's nibbana, cessation. And so even practicing anapanasati, if followed in that way, can also lead to enlightenment. But the four foundations of mindfulness is generally used when people are going beyond just the stages of jhana and so on. So, there's a lot more that can be said on the subject, but I just wanted to point out some of those things. And if any of you have any questions about any of that, then you could write them down for this evening. I just wanted to ask, so how many people are now able to start noticing more things kind of coming and going through the mind much clearer than before in your meditations? Have anybody seen how quickly certain things just arise and vanish so quickly it almost kind of shocks you? Wow. Or even a thought arises in the mind, and even if you wanted to think about it, it ceases. Oh, what you thought? That's really the impermanence. Huh? Even when you want to hold on to something, it vanishes. So I encourage you to, whatever you can remember about these, what I've been discussing. And of course, the four foundations of mindfulness is not that you practice one only, then you forget that, and then you practice another one, and you forget that, and you practice. No, they're all accumulative. So you never leave the body and breathing, really, even though you're contemplating feelings, you're contemplating the mind, just as in the Anapanasati Sutta says, breathing in, experiencing, impermanence, breathing out, experiencing impermanence, and so on. So, we never let go of the breathing body because that's the connection to the present moment. And then, after you don't leave the feelings either, because feelings are always going to be there. Perceptions are rising on feelings, so you're just including perception on top of the feeling already. And even the mental state is a reaction to the perception, so it's not like you're leaving one thing and only focusing on one thing. But you never know what's going to happen in your practice. So, maybe you have been watching the breath, or contemplating the breath, or the posture. But then all of a sudden some strong impact, some strong sound, comes and triggers off some agitation. Then at that moment, you contemplate the sixfold sense sphere. Because of the ear and sound and the fetter. What is this fetter arising when sound comes to the ear? Agitation. Because you can't control what or when anything is going to come through the senses or the body. You might be in a nice state of concentration, but all of a sudden a sharp pain might come into your side or something. So, you leave whatever you're on at that moment, and then you say, contemplating this painful feeling. contemplating the sixfold sense of the body and the feelings and the fetters that are arising, fear, worry, anxiety, mind. So it's like whatever happens, you have something at your beck and call to immediately use for contemplation. That's why it's such a beautiful, all-comprehensive sutta, because it covers every facet of our body-mind-world process. Everything. There's nothing left out. And so by familiarizing yourself with that, and go overing it over and over, it's like you have it on instant Google recall. And when something happens, immediately you know the proper contemplation to put onto that in order to help the mind let go of whatever disturbance it's causing. And then you come back into your flow of meditation again. Until you get to that point, at some point when, these factors of enlightenment are strong, then at any time during that meditation, you can have some deep insights. Maybe not that entering the stream insight, but nevertheless, you can still have these other type of insights that I was mentioning earlier. Just these aha moments. That's what impermanence is. Or, deeper understanding of suffering. Suffering isn't just a toothache, my gosh. Suffering is mental, it's not physical. So these kind of insights, they're very important. Because they all add up, over the course of time, until you get to, the bigger ones. Okay? I think that may be enough for this.